Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. In this video, we are going to show you how to defend in FIFA 23. Not knowing these tips will be the main reason why you struggle all year long. This video is going to show you everything that you need to know about defending from beginning to end with no useless BS. We're going to show you how to apply the exact strategies and techniques in our own gameplay to make our defending top level. Now during this video we're going to be showing you some advanced techniques that work in combination with this video to take your defending to the next level, so stay tuned for that. So in order for us to keep producing videos like this, we need your support by hitting the like button, subscribing and turning on the notifications bell so that you know exactly when we release new content. So here is exactly what we will be covering in this video. So let's get right into it. So like anything, you're only as good as your foundations and fundamentals. You need to be rock solid at the basics of defending before you can move on to more complex areas. So here is a list of all the basic button controls that you need to be aware of, but more importantly, be comfortable with using, as we're going to be using them a lot throughout this video. So make sure you're confident with using them. So moving on. Let's move into the first thing, which is learning to jockey, but actually learning to do it properly. For us, this is the most important aspect of defending that you need to learn and become good at, as this will be a big part in how successful you become at defending. So to perform the jockey, as we touched on before, you need to hold the left trigger or the L2 if you're on PlayStation and pair this with the directional stick so that you move the jockey in the directional that you want. Now one of the biggest mistakes that people make when defending using the jockey is to hold the sprint button at the same time, and this engages something called the sprint jockey. Now, I'm not saying that the sprint jockey is terrible and it should never be used, but it is a main problem that a lot of people have and it causes their bad defending. So let me show you what I mean. So here's the sprint jockey in action, and this is something that we see all the time, and in our opinion, it's the number one thing that causes problems for people defensively. The combination of holding the sprint button and the jockey button at the same time causes you to sprint straight past the challenge, making it extremely easy for your opponent to get past you, as you're unable to change direction quickly after engaging the sprint jockey. Now in this example, you can see the ball is played into the midfielder. What we see a lot of people do is take control of their centre back and sprint towards the ball carrier. And as you can see, this leaves a massive hole in our defence, which leaves a huge space for them to just play a simple through ball into. But luckily, we're able to save ourselves by using our goalkeeper, who bailed us out of potentially conceding a goal. More on goalkeepers later. So let's go into an example of how to actually jockey correctly, which will result in much higher success and lead to far less errors or mistakes when defending. So this time, instead of sprinting, what we need to do is be patient. First off, you can see we are effectively switching between our defenders. We're not yanking any of them out, which forces our opponent to attack slightly differently. Notice how his attackers are much narrower now, which makes it much easier for us to read any potential pass in behind, because there's just no space because of how well we've defended this situation. So when we switch to our centre back, we're only holding the L2 button. We're not holding the right trigger to engage the sprint jockey. We're just holding the left trigger by itself and using the directional stick. And you can see this gives us much more control and precision, and we're able to make the tackle and stop the attack. So the next thing we want to move into is passing lanes. Now passing lanes is very, very difficult to master, and definitely something that requires a lot of practice. Because it is tricky to master, but it is something that can really help you once you get it good, because once you get the probability on your side, you have to kind of guess where you think your opponent is going to pass the ball. And you can see in this example that we've got right here, we thought that the most obvious pass was that he was going to pass it straight up to his striker. A lot of people are quite impatient in this game, so they're going to play it as fast forward as they can. So you can see his striker is making a good run in behind. We've highlighted our midfielder because we think he is best positioned to just slide across to his left. Just by using the left trigger just to jockey, that's all we're doing. We're not pressing any of the buttons, and just to get in front of that passing lane. It is just again about getting probability on our side. As you can see, it was the most obvious pass, it was the most likely pass, and that was the pass that he ended up playing, and then we was able to intercept that ball. So we didn't do anything too crazy. In terms of reading passing lanes, it is more about just using your own gut and just feeling about where you feel like someone's going to get and pass the ball. And if he just passed it across to the side, just a sideways pass, that's no danger. So you really want to, when you're looking at passing lanes, you need to think about covering the most dangerous passing lane, and that is the one that will often be the most beneficial to you. So if you're enjoying the video and you have found it helpful so far, please leave a like on the video. It does help us massively. And make sure you leave a comment down below, as this goes a long way to help supporting our channel. We massively appreciate it. So let's get back into it. So next up we have got 1v1 defending, and this is another area that we think massively kills people. And one of the biggest problems is a lot of people like to press the B or the circle button, which is the tackle button. And this is something that can really kill your defending if you get it wrong. When you lunge into a tackle and get it completely wrong, your defender is completely out of the attack, and that's where panic can set in, because people are then frantically trying to switch player, trying to rectify the error, and then before you know it, the opponent has scored. Now again, we're not saying that using the tackle button is bad, but you have to be careful when you use it. It's really something that is less of a problem if you use it higher up the field, but when you start getting into your own 18-yard box and you start lunging into tackles, that's when big problems. You know, you need to really get that out of your game. We do recommend not using the tackle button really when you're from about 30 yards from goal. Any more than that, and you know, that lunge and that miss can really be critical. A good example is when people like to play quick 1-2 passes between strikers. Again, if you lunge in after the 1-2, you're completely out of the game, and then your opponent's attacker is able to just spin in behind very, very easily. So it is something that you do need to think about. So when you are one-on-one defending, what you need to do is it requires patience and probability. So for example, if you're on the wing against someone with pace and skill, you obviously need to be more wary of the pace in behind. You need to make sure you track any runner in behind first, as that's what people will look to exploit. They'll look to exploit balls in behind, especially if you are someone who plays on a high depth. If there are players inside for him to pass to, then the best thing to do is to cover inside and let him run on the wing. It's probably a little bit less dangerous if he runs on the outside than if he runs on the inside, especially if you've got a fast fullback. You can catch up eventually, and you'll be able to track him down before he crosses the ball. Maybe you put a slide tackle in, it goes out for a corner or a throw in or something like that. Either way, you are in a good position to be able to stop the ball. But we always suggest, if you're in doubt, make sure you cover the inside, as more damage can be done on the inside than on the outside when you are 1v1 defending. Now, player switching is always a big topic of debate on which method is best. Now, for us, we don't really like to use the L1 player switching. We don't find it super accurate. We personally prefer the right stick switching. Now, that is also not the most accurate either, and there's definitely a degree of error. You know, sometimes you will flick across and it might flick to the center back rather than your right center mid, so that is not the most accurate, but for us it's definitely more accurate than the L1 switching. Now, one thing we touched on before was people doing a lot of panic switching, especially when they make a mistake, and this actually compounds the mistake by frantically switching players and pulling more players out of position, and you actually make it a lot easier for an opponent. So one thing that we actually suggest is to switch player less. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily grabbing one player and sitting on them and letting the AI do all the work for you, because this is just not great either, and this will also create some other problems down the line. So we personally prefer in defensive situations that you try and avoid switching player as little as possible. Generally, only if the play gets switched from one side to the other, then you need to switch across to maybe your left mid or your left center mid or whoever it may be. But we recommend trying to switch player less, and this will actually yield in you having a much better team shape. The AI will keep you in shape a lot more, and then you can just press with the right players that you need. So player switching less is actually a real big benefit to you. And by switching player less, this also gets around another problem that people have, which is partly not our fault as players. It's because of the inaccuracy that can sometimes come with player switching too much. You know, it doesn't necessarily give you the player you want, and then you frantically start switching player, and then you're not focused on what's happening on the pitch, and now you're behind the ball and you may end up conceding goals or chances. So switching players only when you need to will definitely help and improve your defending. Now, the next thing is utilizing goalkeepers effectively. We touched on this with an example way back at the beginning of the video, and you can see how we used our goalkeeper very effectively to save a chance for us. And we believe the goalkeeper is a very underused tool and something a lot of people overlook. The next thing is something called baiting. A lot of you might be thinking, what is baiting? Now, baiting is where you use your goalkeeper to force someone into a mistake, and it's only something you use if there is no other option. So you saw in that first example when the guy was coming clean through on goal, our defender wasn't fast enough to catch up, so we had to use our goalkeeper. Now, rather than just letting our goalkeeper sit there, we used the triangle button to bait him out, and we baited our keeper out, so it made the attacker have to think, oh god, the keeper's coming out, what do I do? And before you know it, we was on top of him, we was able to make the save. Now, you have to use it very, very carefully. You don't just use it all the time, and it is something that does take practice to get good at, because if you pull him out too far, then the chip shot becomes very, very easy for opponent. They can just chip it over the top of you. You have to use it just as the attacker has taken another touch forwards, because now it's going to take a couple of seconds for him to get back to the ball, and that's just enough time for you to close the gap and be able to make the save as we did in that first example. So when you can get this right, it is an extremely powerful tool that will really help you save goals that you would normally concede, but you just have to practice. You have to get better with it. It does take time to gauge how far that you need to actually bait, but once you master it, it is an extremely powerful tool to save you defensively. So now we've got the second man press, is one of the last things that we want to get into. Now, this is a really advanced defending tool, and this should only be used by highly skilled players, because it is very, very hard to master, and it will cause a lot of bad habits and a lot of problems for people who can't use it effectively. So we don't recommend using this unless you're a Division 1 player or an elite level player or better. So we won't go into this in too much depth, but basically when the AI is on the ball, all you have to do is press the R1 button. So what you can do is cover a passing lane with the player that you're covering, and by holding the R1 button down, you can use the AI to press the guy in behind. So you can cover a run in behind and still press the ball. But this is something that is very, very advanced, and we will do a detailed video on it going forwards. So we don't want to go into too much depth in it right now. So let's move into just a very quick summary to sum things up and some key things to take away from this video. So when you are close to the attacker in some tight situations, you need to make sure you let go of the sprint button so that you're not sprint jockeying and that you are just jockeying. You need to remember to not use the tackle button unless the danger is low, as in higher up the field, or you have a really good chance to win the ball, or it is a last ditch situation. Make sure you're using the right stick for switching and try to switch player less frequently, and make sure you practice at using baiting the goalkeeper to trick your opponent, but you only use this in critical goal threatening situations when there is no other choice. And most importantly, remember that being patient is always the answer, and raging and frustrating will get you nowhere in life. So that is it for the video, guys. So in order for us to keep making more videos like this, then we do need your help with a few things. First up, we need you to hit the like button. Secondly, we need you to hit the subscribe button. Thirdly, we need you to hit the notifications bell so that you know when we release new content. And fourth, we need to make sure you leave a comment down below, so you make sure other topics that you want us to cover, you put them down there, and we will do our best to make them all. And make sure you do follow us on all of our other social media platforms such as TikTok, Twitter, and Discord if you do have any other questions. The link to all of these things is down in the description. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.